So, um, we've been reading about the Sermon of the Mount in the last several weeks. Now, so in here, in the Sermon of the Mount, Jesus brings he gives us something that is both comforting and deeply unsettling as well. Now, we're gonna focus today on Matthew 5, um, and we're gonna go to, if you can go with me to Matthew 5 verse 21, um, 21 through 20. It's 21 through 27, 26. So it says, you have heard that our ancestors were told, you must not murder, and if you commit murder, you are subject to judgment. But I say, if you are even angry with someone, you're subject to judgment, and if you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought to the court. And if you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. So if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar and in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar and go and be reconciled to that person. And then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you're on the way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you will be thrown in prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. So we all read this before. We all know the normal, punishment if we do something bad, because he's telling us here, now he's teaching us about anger here. If we think about everything that goes on in our lives every day, like Brother Andy right now dealing with all of his physical problems, and his voice and everything, he probably has the right to be angry. Sister Natalia fell, and now he's in a lot of pain, and so so we always have some motive or reason to be angry. We deal with things every day in our lives, and it's very unsettling. That it's super easy for us to let anger take over. A few days ago, I was in our kitchen, and we had a cup of full of water, and I lifted the cup, and the lid came off, and I spilled everything. It was a lot of water, so um, and normally I would just explode and start screaming and kicking and yelling, and then but this time for some reason I just grabbed the cup and I started cleaning, and it was a lot of water, so the wood was all and the cabinets was all wet and everything, and but in the previous days, I had been reflecting and thinking, like as I was studying all of this, um, and somehow what I was reading and what I was studying, it just came to me, and I decided, I made the choice to not be angry and just to act, to do what I needed to do to clear that mess and everything. And I think a lot of times we do have a choice. We do have a choice to be angry or not. So, as I was saying before, and here Jesus is doing something that is unsettling. It's comforting but unsettling at the same time. So he takes these commands from the law that we already knew, but then he expands on it. So this is not directed to people that is obviously messed up. So he's not just telling the criminal just saying, do not kill. You should not kill. So we already know it, and we check that box and say, okay, I haven't killed anybody. I'm good. But in reality, I think he's directing that to us. To all of us here, people that we just come here and we're sitting here and we just you know we come to church, so we're good. But so he goes on and says, you have heard it say, you should not murder. And then, but then he goes beneath the surface and he says, he confronts that anger that's underlaying, so the anger that comes from the heart, you know, it it all starts in the heart. So this passage now is not about extreme sin, which is killing someone. It's about our everyday hearts, all the things that go on every single day that will make us angry. So God, He's not really concerned with what we have done, but with what we're allowing to be unchecked in our hearts. So he starts saying the commands that we all know: you should not murder. But he makes it clear that murder does not start with an act; it starts in the heart. And he tells us that. So he's always concerned. God actually is concerned with what's happening beneath the surface, because he looks at our heart. He goes much deeper in there. Like 1 Samuel 16 says, 16:7, I think it is. When we leave that anger unchecked, when we don't deal with it, it's not harmless anymore. It's just not affecting us. It affects on everything else. Um, and if we go to James chapter 1, verse 20, sister, please. So in here it tells us clearly, it says, human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. So when we get angry, that's not really what God wants from us or for us. We see this play out every day. Uh, Something as simple as when we're driving, in traffic, somebody cuts in front of us, and then we just anger just flares up, instantly. It's like we just blow up. Or somebody at work gets a promotion, and that we thought it belonged to us, and everything. We're angry at that. We smile and we say, hey, congratulations and everything. But sometimes we keep it. Not only on that, but on many other things that happen to us, we just keep it in our heart, and that's unchecked. We're not actually dealing with it. So we keep our sometimes even a family member would bring up an old wound. When we're talking to our family members, and just we may look obedient on the outside, but we still carry that hostility or resentment inside. And some the funny thing is our culture actually celebrates that. So we people makes those videos where they show outrage for something, whatever it is, something that's going on in society or whatever, and this gets attention, and these people will feel justified, because okay, so everybody's looking at me, I'm angry now, and everybody's looking at me, so they feel justified just by the attention. Um, but Jesus calls all of us to a higher standard. He we cannot pretend that anger is not there, and we can also not let anger rule over us. But Jesus calls us to surrender that anger to Him. See, the law here exposes the problem, but Jesus offers the cure, and in this case, the cure. So only Christ can change the hearts and produce the righteousness from the inside out. If we just let Him get in our hearts and take care of that anger and just surrender that to Christ. Sometimes we even say things that we think that don't matter, but I, I I have to tell you that words matter because our hearts matter. You know, and he warns us in here. If we go to Matthew 12, um, chapter 12, verse 34, in here it says, out of the abundance of our heart, the mouth speaks. And we've heard this so many times. We've heard, even us, we repeat that to ourselves. Every time we get angry, this is like the go-to verse. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. So in the Sermon on the Mount, he tells us this, and so so he asks this because when we say something, and whatever it is, sometimes we actually do say things to hurt others, out of anger. That's our heart is, that's how our heart is at that moment, or frustrations that have been accumulating, and out of anger we say something to someone that just to hurt him. And that's those are not just words, because they come from somewhere. And what we say actually reveals what's living inside our hearts. And Jesus takes these words very seriously. When we see it everywhere as well. And then we always bring the example as online. Because online that's the main place where we know about everybody else, and well, it's always what's going on online. And online people can say things that they would not tell you face to face, because it's it's like they're not there. It takes the humanity out of the person, so when we dehumanize that person, so we don't really think that we're hurting someone, especially when we talk out of anger. And even when we tell our kids, something happens at home, and we tell our kids, what's going on, what's wrong with you, you can never do anything right. And at some point, us as parents, sometimes we say it, again, out of anger, and we excuse it, but by just saying, no, I was just venting. Is it really just venting, or are we projecting what our heart is, what our heart, it's not just venting. We are actually, we're actually sometimes even changing other people's hearts. Where now we're making them angry, so we project that anger that we had inside of us, and now somebody else is angry, and then that person's gonna do something out. They're gonna go home, and they're gonna be driving, and they're gonna probably be doing something that's gonna make somebody else angry, and then and that's how everything goes. Everything just starts becoming more and more, and it expands, and it projects to everybody else, and we just say they deserved it. That person that cut in front of me, he deserved it, So, but Jesus wants that contempt, and it tells us here that it's destructive, and because again, it dehumanizes the people that was created in God's image. Every single one of us was created in God's image. So when we talk to somebody out of anger, it's like we're talking to God, we're talking to Jesus, because we are His image. Now, if we go on Ephesians 4:29. So in here, I feel like Jesus is calling us to face. Actually, Jesus is not calling us to fake kindness or silence the truth. Kingdom living does not ignore emotions, but it also doesn't let emotions lead either. So we should not ignore the emotions, but we should not let emotions take over and control us. So in Ephesians here it says that let no corrupt word proceed out of our mouth, but what is good for necessary edification. This is how it echoes um, in every single one of us. Kingdom speech is spirit-shaped speech, words that bring correction without cruelty, truth without contempt, and honesty without hate. Know this. All of us should know this, that when our hearts are aligned with Christ, our word begins to reflect Jesus in everything that we do and everything that we say. And then he continues to say here, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going a little fast on my thoughts because there was so many important things that we had to say and today, and that's very important for all of us. So I'm trying to go a little quick here, but we're gonna come back to this at another time as well, because this is so extent. Our heart is so great that it could be affected in so easily. But Jesus here continues to say on 23 on chapter verse 23, it says, so if you're presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice at the altar and go and reconcile with that person. That's Matthew 5. I'm just going back and forth to Matthew 5. So again, Jesus starts with the command that everybody knows: you should not murder. But he also makes it clear that murder doesn't start with an act. It starts with anger in the heart, and then God's. Okay, so going back here. So we were saying that so our words reflect Jesus, right? Another point I would like to make here that is very important here. I don't think that Christ in here is actually just talking about anger just as something that affects us every day, but it also tells us how to deal with that anger. And most of the time, we have to reconcile with ourselves first before we can project that onto others. When we get angry, we have to deal with that anger in our heart first. So with reconciliation actually comes before ritual. In here, Jesus is being very clear in here where he says that if we are presenting a sacrifice in Matthew 5, again, going back to Matthew 5, it says if you're bringing your gift to the altar and remember that someone has something against you, you stop. If you're coming here, you're already on your way to bring the sacrifice. Jesus is telling you, stop. Stop and drop everything you have, because I don't want it right now. I want you to go back, and I want you to go and deal with that, with the person or the issue that was actually affecting you before you come here and give to bring your offering or your sacrifice to me. And that's actually how seriously Jesus takes broken relationships. When he was saying this to the people, just imagine you being out there in the mount when he was talking about this, and he's telling you that reconciliation takes priority over worship. Before you come to me, he says, you go and reconcile. And we know how important worship is. So sometimes we're here and we're an example, like I'm up here singing, and I'm pouring my heart out with my singing. What I'm singing is coming out of my heart, but at the same time, mad at my brother. I'm still angry at him because of something that he did to me many years ago, which, it happened. It makes me angry still and everything. And so, but I come here and I'm singing, and I'm not dealing with that. I'm not dealing with that anger. So Jesus tells us, sometimes even worship, even reconciling with your brother, with your sister, with your family member is even more important than worship. Um, he's not saying that worship doesn't matter. He's saying that worship and relationships are both inseparable. So when you worship, you are well, the scripture is clear. It says, if anyone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. You know, um, think of it like this. You know, we see a pastor. We respect a pastor because we know the kind of father he is, right? So now imagine we come, or imagine he had a son. You know, we come to him and we tell him, hey, brother, I like you so much, but your son, I don't like him so much. How do you think that he will feel? It's just, you think he'll be happy when you tell him that you don't like his son? You're okay with him, but not you don't like his son. So this is exactly what how God takes that. If we say I love God, but we hate, if I hate my brother, I'll be a liar. Like 1 John 4:20 tells us that, it's very clear in here is that if anyone says I love God and hates his brother, then he is a liar. So there was a church that I used to go to. This is a true story. I used to sing at that church, and that there was two of our from our group were sing beautiful. They were very gifted, but we were out there singing, but they hated each other. You know, and we knew it. We knew the kind of dislike they had towards each other, and um, so they sang the same songs and prayed the same prayers, and took communion together. And I used to pray a lot for them, because that I could see the hypocrisy, and it would make, uh, that was one of the worst that experiences I had at that time, because I would see it every time. Um, Eventually, something happened. I was trying to remember the other day if it was this what we were reading one time, but eventually they they um, they were just convicted by something that we read in a study that we were doing, and one of them actually felt convicted by it, and he went out there and reached out, and they were there. Both of them were there crying together because both of them were feeling the same way. And the funny thing is that none of them could remember exactly what had happened, that made them feel that way. All they could remember was that anger and the hatred. I can't say that it was hatred, but it was anger towards each other, and then they didn't even know what caused it. After that, the the worship felt completely different. It felt good again. And this is because they they decided to reconcile. So this is the best example I can think of right now, because it's something that I lived. I could see the interactions before, and I know it was something that was big at that time when it happened, but then it transformed into I don't even know, but I'm just angry. So uh, when we reconcile with someone, it doesn't really mean that everything's gonna be the same way it was, and it doesn't guarantee that we're gonna be close to each other again, or we're gonna be in agreement. but it frees our heart. It takes all of that cancer out of our heart, and we heal. And sometimes it just means obedience, um, taking that first step, or a phone call, a text, because most of the times, sometimes even a misunderstood text, will that is not cleared out, or we just think about it, and it happens to us all the time. We read a text and we interpret it in a certain way, and then we're just angry, and instead of calling that person and asking about it, we just decide, oh no, I'm not gonna text anymore. I'm just gonna be angry. And so it doesn't mean that everything is the same, but it changes the dynamic and it changes everything. It changes the way you interact with each other. Um, the relationships are not instantly restored, but something changes when you get to that. Um, but we have to be obedient to God. When He tells us to we need to have that humble conversation sometimes. Um, and Paul reminds us of that in Romans 12:18. In Romans 12:18, he tells us clearly. Um, so he reminds us that it is possible. If it's possible, as much as depends on you, live peacefully with all men. Reconciliation does not make us weak, but it makes us worship in an honest way. We go back to that. We bring our sacrifices to the altar, but if we're not coming here with an open heart, with a clean heart, it is not the same. We're denying Christ when we do that. It's the same with anger. When we remain in anger, we deny Christ. Because at that moment, He's not in our hearts. So we have to deal with all these issues with conflict early and honestly. So Jesus urges us to deal with conflict quickly, because unresolved conflict never stays small. It always grows. Again, we go back to the same thing. It grows inside of you. Think of it like an untreated infection. As we know, doctors will tell us, if you have cancer, it's just going to continue to grow, and it's going to affect everything else, and it's going to infect everything. It metastasizes, and it goes into every other organ. But when it's treated early, it's just they just that whatever type of cancer it is, or any other example you can think of. When they take it out early, is it can be cured. So I might have to go a little quicker. So there's just one more point that I need to make here. So Jesus teaches us here that avoiding conflict doesn't bring peace, but it hardens our hearts and gives the enemy room to work. And that's why He calls us to courage. He calls us to courage, not avoidance. So it does. Confronting the issue does three things. It addresses the conflict early and protects our hearts, and it preserves relationships, and it reflects the reconciling heart of Christ. So, if you guys remember when Jesus was being crucified, he said, "Forgive them, Father, because they don't know what they're doing," or maybe not exactly like that, but so He didn't wait for everybody to be better. He didn't wait for everybody to fix ourselves before moving forward to us. So that's what He commands us to do, to come forward and clear anything that could be hurting us. Now, just in conclusion, Jesus is not calling us to a better behavior, but He's calling us to a heart level transformation, because the transformation has to come from the heart. And the greatest illustration here is Jesus himself, what he teaches us from the cross. He didn't wait for us to apologize first, and he didn't demand explanations or hold our sins over our heads. This scriptures tells us that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So in this world, we're quick to judge, and in a world filled with broken relationships. We have to think about several things some questions that we need to ask ourselves when we get when we're getting angry, or we're mad at somebody, and it's hurting our hearts and our relationship with Christ. And one of the questions is that when we get angry, what is that anger exposing in our hearts? What is deeply in our hearts? What's in there that is it's making us feel this way? And we also have to ask ourselves that when we think about that word reconciliation, whose name comes to mind? Who do you think of when it comes to mind? Is it your son that is giving you so much trouble, or is it your husband that is not treating you well? Is it your wife that is not being supportive on something that you want to do, or is it your friend, your brother, your sister? But we also have to ask ourselves, what step of obedience is God asking me to take this week? Is God telling me to go and talk to that person that I've been angry with for so long? Or is he telling me to call my sister, which I haven't talked to in so long, because of something that happened, that text that I sent or she sent me a long time ago? So the invitation here is very clear. Let the anger go. Watch what we say, and always take the first step towards peace. Because that way, that's how we're gonna reflect Jesus, how Jesus is, or what Jesus means in our lives. Let us be the people that we just don't only obey the letter of the law, but the people that lives out the heart of the gospel by choosing forgiveness, humility, and peace, because that's what Jesus has done for us.